Organizations are faced with an average of almost 1,900 cyber attacks incidents per organization, representing a 75% year-over-year increase. My name is Paul Nashawaty. I'm the practice lead and principal analyst, and this is the AppDevANGLE. Today, I'm joined by Geoffrey Mattson, CEO of SecureAuth, a company that is doing some serious work in the intersection of identity security and zero trust. Geoffrey, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, great to have you on. Super important topic. I mean, this is top of mind for many organizations. Why don't you introduce yourself and introduce the company?
Yeah, my name is Geoff Mattson. I'm the CEO of SecureAuth. SecureAuth has actually been around for about 20 years, solving identity security problems for critical customers, some of the largest financial institutions, some of the largest healthcare providers, some very large retailers for whom identity is the lifeblood of their industry. And now we're getting pulled very strongly into providing agentic security. And I was brought in to help facilitate the rapid growth that we're experiencing as a result of that.
Yeah, very, very cool. And it's changing very, very rapidly, right? So when we look at this, we see that identity is no longer a back office IT problem, right? So we're seeing that SecureAuth is growing in that direction for agentic and AI solutions. Identity is really becoming the front line of enterprise security. And the numbers here back it up. We see organizations, as I mentioned up front, 1,900 cyber attacks per week. That jumped nearly 75% in a single year. You start to understand why the conversation really around authentication and access control is completely changed. The old parameters is really just not there anymore. And firewall is not your friend anymore, right? And attackers know that, right? So exactly. We see this. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, so it's funny because we feel like we really made this, this huge evolutionary change to passkey technology, which a lot of people see passkeys popping up. They don't really know what they are, but they're a very strong cryptographic method of proving identity that's very hard to phish, to be susceptible to phishing attacks. So we really thought that we had, closed a big avenue of attack for a lot of customers who were able to move to that technology. And as soon as we shut that door, this 100 new doors open, which is every one of these employees that logs into a company, now they can have agents working for them. And it's like having new workers, but these new workers, it's like having a ghost army working for you. They're unaccountable. They are able to work, 24 hours a day. And they've added this new attack vector or a new threat vector. So, like any application, agents can be compromised by having a bad actor take them over. And in fact, as people are probably aware, LLMs are not very difficult to hack. The attack surface for a typical application is whatever the application will accept. So if it's a SQL server, it's SQL queries, for instance. But with LLMs, the attack surface is the entire set of languages that it understands. And the way that it mixes the data with the execution is a recipe for not being secure. So they're very, very easy to hack. And then also with this agentic flow, the way they pass tokens around that are used, sort of as tickets to allow you into different parts of the company, it's very easy to steal those credentials too. So those are like traditional attack vectors. But, I just had a call from a CISO from a, major financial customer who said, my worst attack vector right now is, the call is coming from inside the building. It's the C-suite. Someone in the C-suite vibe coding. They have exposed some code, publicly that is a data breach, right? So my point is that these agents themselves are so powerful that they introduce this new type of threat, which is rogue agent behavior, right? So now we have we've introduced tens of new actors for every employee, and these actors are not only very susceptible to traditional cyber threats, they've created this new class, right, which is rogue agent behavior. So it's we're cursed to live in interesting times, right? So
we absolutely are, and I think that you've touched on so much in that just a short period of time there. There's so much to think about here, right? When we look at it, this reinvention of IAM or identity management, right? It really has to kind of be taken into consideration when you have identity and access management. It's not about the human factor. It's not about the machine factor. It's about the non-human factor as well, which is what you were talking about. And we see that, that these systems just are dramatically changing the workforce and hybrid applications and distributed environments and allowing, as you were talking about, the attack surface to be followed. So organizations are really discovering this kind of focus around traditional IAM tools that were built for a world that really, I have to say, no longer exists, right?
exactly.
Ask you, Jeff, like from a question perspective, how does the core definition of identity security change over the last few years, and where do organizations typically get stuck in this transition from the heritage IAM systems that they had to a more modern approach that you were talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I think, I think what we're seeing now is a collapsing of two different areas in security. One is identity, and the other is more traditional cybersecurity, like detection and response. So in the old days, last year, you used to certify that a person was who they say they are, and then give them the right to do certain things, and then they're off and running. And after they're off and running, it's the job of detection systems to see if there are any bad guys, any hackers have gotten into your organization. But now with agents, if you think about an AI agent, it's not like a human being. It's like a software process doing, right? So its identity is really based on the intent of the agent at any given time. It changes constantly. And you and I, we can both, download Claude 3.7 and start running it. And it will behave completely differently based on, what you ask it to do versus what I ask it to do. And my Claude will act differently in different parts of the day, because these applications, they're not deterministic, they're stochastic. And so what we need to do is constantly reevaluate the identity or the intent of that agent and see if at this moment in time, is it behaving the way it should behave? Is it acting the way we want this agent to behave? And we don't just certify it once and say, okay, you're good to go. You're off and running. To constantly monitor it. This is a collapse of detection and response, which happens in real time, versus IAM, which used to happen at discrete times in the process.
No, absolutely. But I think it also comes down to, you're creating this modern kind of approach where, you're building security that doesn't make the users hate it, right? I mean, that's the other side of it. It's like security has always been known as like, okay, there's tension, and security teams live with the tension because organizations like, oh, you're making me do these things, and it's a lot of pain. But like those added layers of authentication makes things extremely secure, as we know. But it can also prevent that smooth and risk exposure that you really want to kind of have. So for the long time, the default answer was there's going to be friction, right? There's going to be this friction, extra steps, more prompts, harder passwords, right? Those are all the things that we saw were, kind of in place, and they're still in place in most systems. But the approach has real cost, right? In productivity, user abandonment, honestly, and shadow IT, right? And like you were talking about, there's different agents that work on different places, and the people find workarounds, right? They kind of they cache their passwords and they just kind of push it through. I think that's a big problem when it comes to the agents. So how are we thinking about, Jeff, when we're looking at this, how are we thinking about solving the friction problem of modern authentication without actually working through, the right now in the terms of the password list or adaptive approaches that, organizations are trying to move towards? It's a kind of a utopian view for security, but it's not quite there yet, is it?
100%. And this friction problem is really amplified with, agents, because you have this, if you look at the two extremes of what you could do, you could have a human owner certify each and every individual action that an agent does. And that's probably the safest way to do things. but the human would do nothing but be clicking through consent screens all day, and he still wouldn't keep up with the agent, right? So because agents operate so quickly. And so, what we're doing is, you mentioned this. This has been in identity security. There is this huge trade-off between friction and security, right? So we have invested for a long time, and we have customers that are retail customers or healthcare retail customers, or banking customers who offer access to their partners and also to consumers. And there is a real cost to introducing too much friction into that process. You spend a lot of money trying to acquire customers, and you'll lose them, at a very measurable rate if you introduce too much friction into this process. So we've developed analytics over a long period of time that are used with some of these largest companies that operate at real time, that allow them to make the optimal decision of whether to challenge a user or not. And the more they challenge a user, it's not just the frustration to the user, but there's actually cost. And a lot of people don't think about this, but for instance, if you have SMS challenge a user, it's not a very good thing to do because it's pretty easy to hack with a SIM swap. But also, the companies have to pay significant amounts of money for this SMS service. So we've come up with analytics that in real time, make the decision of whether to step up authentication or step down authentication. So to challenge the actor and make them do more authentication, or to allow them to go through. And this is a fundamentally applicable problem with agents. What we need to do is, if an agent is saying, I want to transfer $1,000 from one account to another, we need to decide whether or not to allow that to happen. And we need to be very good at this, because as I say, agents, they can do thousands of these transactions a second, and there's absolutely no way you can get a human involved, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's changing too rapidly, and the time to action is absolutely changing. So like that introduces the whole zero trust, right? As kind of a conversation, right? It's a term that's been around long enough that it's really, really something that we should think about and talk about, right? But its core architectural principle is you can't trust anything by default, not the network, not the device, not the user session. And that becomes even more so with these agents, right? And the challenge is that zero trust has often been treated as a networking or infrastructure initiative, when identity is actually the load-bearing wall. Right, that's really what's happening there. And with 91% of organizations storing and processing personal identification or identifiable information, or the PII information, it's the stakes are getting this wrong are extremely high. So Jeff, when we look at this, when you're talking about or talking to enterprise security teams about zero trust, how are they making the case that identity has to be starting with at the starting point? And where does it generally identify as, centric to zero trust models like in production? Because this is something that's changing, I believe, very much with the agents in the agentic world, that zero trust no longer means zero trust. Is that true?
Yeah, I'd say that, or agents, you could consider them to be the ultimate case of zero trust. As we say about agents, you can love them, and we do love them, but you can't trust them, right? So they can change their behavior at any point in time, and that's exactly what the basic principle of zero trust is every single transaction you have to decide whether or not it should be allowed, right? So anytime an agent tries to do anything, that particular action has to be judged from a trust perspective. And what we do is we'll use the two vectors to do it. So one is we have authorization policies saying, this user using this agent during this time can only transfer this amount of money, for instance, right? And that's a static policy. But on top of that, what we need to do is look at the behavior of the agent, and we need to see if it's drifted, if the agent is basically acting suspiciously, either because it's been compromised or because it has just gone rogue, right? And So for each and every single action, every time you access Jira, every time you access Bill.com, every time you access Salesforce, we need to, for every action you take on those applications, we make that individual judgment. You talk about this, zero trust as being networking oriented and identity focused. That's exactly what it is. This is inline. It's in network or in virtual network decisions being blocked or allowed through or challenged based on identity considerations, authorization, and behavioral profiling. I think that's really the only way to get agents to be able to run safely in an enterprise.
Yeah, I agree. But I also think that the AI story and security really has two sides, right? Attackers are also using AI to generate more convincing phishing and automated credential stuffing and scaling of accounts to take over operations in ways that weren't possible before. And, this is a rapid time. So if you're not using AI to kind of what you said earlier on the conversation to remediate some of these things, it's a challenge. Our research has shown that 92% of organizations report that AI capabilities are now integrated at least one stage of their software delivery lifecycle. It's a sharp increase from 71% in just in 2024. So we saw a big jump. And so the adoption's real. The question is, where is AI actually delivering measurable value and identity threat detection today? And are we close to being, to having autonomous remediation become a realistic operational capability? Is that real, or is that still in the future?
Well, I think that the use of Copilot technology by security professionals and by non-security professionals, I think that has become something that is mainstreamed, and a lot of people aren't even using specialized products for that. We work with SOC teams that use Claude off the shelf and are able to, analyze logs in ways that were not possible with the type of primitive queries they used to do on their SIMs. But on top of that, I think that as you mentioned, agentic really. AI in general flushes out a lot of existing technical debt we've had in the entire cyber stack. So you talk about, the fact that now anyone who, doesn't even have English language skills can generate very convincing phishing messages or vishing messages, right? Using AI. And so that allows, people to be phished and companies to be attacked through phishing means. And as I mentioned, that we do actually have a solution for phishing. This is the passkey technology, for instance, is considered to be, phishing immune or phishing resistant. It can, if it's implemented properly, it can pretty much eliminate that threat vector. And so, now is the time for more enterprises to start looking at deploying measures like that to make that upgrade, because some very, very intelligent LLMs are going to be trying to trick you into phishing. But then on top of that, like I said, the biggest concern that we're dealing with explosively, though, is, these LLMs have the hacking capability, right? They're very, very clever. And what we found is that when organizations are using agentic, the LLM can very quickly find ways around controls that the enterprises have put in place to contain them. And they can do things that are completely uninspected because they very cleverly, really brilliantly can do, what we call a living off the land attack, where they're able to exploit weaknesses in your infrastructure to get around any controls that you have. So, as I said, the hacker is in the building, and sometimes, like I said, the agent can be acting with benign intent. It may want to, just do its job, but it may be going outside of the scope of what it should be doing in order to do that, right? So it can, for instance, aggregate a lot of data, pull a lot of PII data, make it public, turn people into paper clips. So that's why, as I said, we have to, we want to harness the power of that technology, but part of that process is, on the other side of it, we need to manage every single action that it tries to take in the enterprise and make sure it's copacetic.
Definitely a big fear for many organizations. Jeff, before we wrap up here, we talked about a lot. This is top of mind for obviously for many, many organizations, it's very important. For the listeners of the podcast, where would they go to learn more about you or what your team is doing, and where should they go?
Oh yeah, I would encourage them to look at SecureAuth.com, look at our website. One great resource that they can start with there is we have a public agent registry, which will show you, how threatening different well-known agents are, and provide some mitigation steps to allow you to deploy them safely. We want everyone to embrace this technology. We love it. It's helping us move more quickly. It's helping us move more creatively, and a lot of our customers love it as well. It's being pushed by their boards down. It's being pulled up by their employees, and we think the safety layer needs to be in place so you can run with it as quickly as possible. So check out SecureAuth.com, and you can look at our registry and look at the solutions we offer, and we're happy to talk to anybody about this.
Excellent, Jeff. Exciting times. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you all who tuned in. We really do appreciate you being part of the AppDevANGLE community. But for now, that wraps up this episode. But we'll be back next Wednesday with another conversation diving into the tools, trends, and talent shaping the future of application development. So whether you're deploying at the edge, building with AI, or modernizing your cloud stack, we've got you covered. Be sure to follow us on social if you have any thoughts, questions, or just want to connect. Until next time, stay curious and stay building.